I'd like to open the, I'd like to open the meeting on East Ham's zoning task force. This meeting is being video recorded and broadcast over local access channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham.ma.gov. Thank you. Do we have minutes?
I mailed them out
We
late
do?
yesterday.
You
You want to
did?
see?
Okay.
Show a copy.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes? If so, do I have a motion to accept? Kevin? Second? Sam? All in favor? Okay. The minutes of March 26th are in the books. Thank you all. So we have a discussion of priorities of preliminary review. I would like to ask Paul to walk through these. Just to give some context, ultimately, what we have done in the past is we've kicked around some issues that we think are relevant for us to take a look at. That doesn't necessarily mean we actually come forward with recommendations, but they're topics. And but ultimately, what we have done in the past, after we've done our own internal review, is come up with a set of draft items that we want to look at. And these go to the select board. Our agenda sort of gets affirmed every year by the select board before we go off and do research. So we're anticipating that this would be sometime in September. Wanted to kick this around right now to get some early feeling from the group, but more importantly, since we are going to take a summer hiatus, if there are topics that that, you know, certain of these topics relate to model bylaws that the Cape Cod Commission has already established. There may be studies, etc. My thought is if we have a draft of this, then in the next couple of weeks, Paul could actually maybe send us quote some summer reading. So we could do between now and September.
Just what you mean.
Oh, yeah.
Reports will be due for every.
Reports, yes, you get your
How many
summer-
words? How many words?
But, you know, that rainy summer day on the Cape Cod, you pull out a model bylaw.
And take a nap.
Take a nap. So in any event, nothing is final today, and the last thing I will say is, you know, often sometimes when I looked at some of these lists, there's sort of this notion of, is the issue right for us to attack? And that may be, do we have enough information? Is a high priority? Is there consensus in the community that of a certain direction? So we may have some of these items that, similar to the business district, might in fact be something we start researching this year and may take a second year before we get to recommendations. So I don't want people to feel like if they raise their hand to say something's interesting, that means we're necessarily next January going to be coming out with full-blown recommendations. It'll be a process like we've had in the past. So with that preamble, Paul, would you like to walk us through and
Sure.
describe these for everyone?
Okay, so the first one, commercial uses on residential property. This is really focusing on the commercial rentals, the impact of the Airbnbs and that kind of model. Impacts on neighborhood character, quality of life, kind of around that. And this is kind of based on what's happening in Nantucket and elsewhere where they've had things come up, and some residents have challenged whether that's an allowed use in residential. You know, this did come up as a topic the select board was interested in a few months ago to put on our radar, so that's why it's on here. So intensity of use, interval of rentals, impacts on neighborhoods, that kind of thing, so.
Would an example of one of these be, there's a place on Massasoit where they took a piece of property, built ostensibly a house, but it's very large and has a lot of amenities and lots of parking, and it's being used to rent out, you know, to large groups of people for weeks or weekends or whatever. So it's really not residential at all. No one,
It's actually both. Oh,
right, and no one
Mhm.
lives there for any length of time. It's just, would that be the kind of thing that this might cover? Because it's really. a
Yeah, I mean, I
commercial
think
use.
if we get into it, I think we'll find a few different things going on.
Right.
There's just the kind of weekly rental thing.
Right,
And then there's some places definitely that it's more like
yeah,
events, which that shouldn't really be happening because so if people who are operating a mini resort
Yeah.
and having it as, have your weddings, have your, I think
right,
and they're marketing it that way,
Okay.
that's clearly a commercial use, which shouldn't actually be happening under the bylaw now. But yeah, I think we would get into like kind of differentiating those things, try to get our heads around how we can better regulate them and track them. So there's,
When, so it's come up over the last year, the impact on neighborhoods,
right,
and we look now at, sort of define heights, size, right? We don't have a way to measure the impacts on neighborhood that are more subtle, like if you have a big place like that, but the rest of the neighborhood is smaller, maybe smaller lots, definitely smaller houses. We don't have a way to quantify that, so when we're looking at the impact, we seem to slide over the softer or the things that we haven't,
the quality.
quantified.
the
Yeah, the
qualitative
qualitative,
side.
we're not doing qualitative, we're doing quantitative, and I don't think that's leaving the neighborhood residents with what they would like
yeah.
from where
Well,
they
that's
live.
further on.
Oh,
We have that on page 2.
oh my,
But
Okay.
the planning board, it's Pat and Kevin though, we just wrestled with that
Mhm.
on a recent one. So I think you're right. There's
okay,
gonna be some overlap with some of these other topics if we get into this one, where it's like
Okay.
things that are beyond site coverage that get into how do we regulate the use and the intensity of the use?
Just on the first one, this may be sort of one of those things that is it right to make a recommendation? In Nantucket, the individual landowner challenged Nantucket saying, your zoning does not allow commercial use in a residential neighborhood, and this Airbnb next to me is a commercial use. The land court judge ruled, you're correct, it's in violation of the law, a violation of the zoning code, which sent Nantucket back. They've gone to town meeting 3 times. First time was just to blanketly allow Airbnbs throughout the residential district. That was shut down by the town. Then they came up with 2 other scenarios, which were modifications. One was called the Nantucket zone, where they kind of threw out their existing zoning code and said, for Nantucket, we will allow in residential neighborhoods rentals between Memorial Day and Labor Day, no more than 6 turnovers, you're allowed. That went down by year-round residents, and there was some third version. In any event, they're no longer going back to town meeting. What they have formally done is appealed to the Superior Court, the lower court's ruling.
the owners of
The
The
town.
town, the
The
town has appealed the lower court ruling. So that appeal is pending, and that may be something we can get some insight about Superior
So-
Court appeals.
So this is an example where the town administrators are fighting on behalf of the Airbnb.
Yes,
So the town keeps saying no, and now the town says, okay. now
well,
we're back.
I mean, you can imagine the
Economic-
monetary
Oh, I
economics in Nantucket when, the average weekly rental is like $10,000 a week.
Yeah.
This is up, I mean, one major building investor divested of everything last summer. He said, I'm out of here. I don't want to be part of this craziness. And it's really I mean, if we think about RTE and the divisions between part-time and full-time, you can imagine in Nantucket, the year-rounders are saying, we need housing, and they're voting against all of this. But we'll see, I mean, again, that's working its way through the courts, so it may be, it's something we just have to
Monitor.
monitor and understand. So, sorry.
Paul, it's a process question. I know these are all good conversations, and I know we'll never get through them all if we spend 15 minutes. Are you looking for our input on these now, or any of them that would say, hey, I really don't think this, like, would you like to hear us sort of say, this is one we'd rather not spend time on, or you have to?
Well, I mean, we can, maybe I want everybody to be aware of what these are. So if maybe we'll stop the discussion and Paul can
Yeah,
just run through them quickly.
So inclusionary zoning, so we did that a couple years ago, but then as a staff recommendation, I think we need to go back through clarify some things, tighten it up. I think it's a little top heavy, the bylaw, when we start applying it to small time developers, folks that aren't actually developers, but just business folks that want to throw some apartments in there. So we've encountered a few things that already, so this would just be to,
And maybe if you have a comment, you don't have to on each one, but if you have a comment about whether this is something that would take a lot of time or be relatively quick and easy.
yeah. So this one I can say, we've already started looking at it. We have a preliminary review from the county housing office that we could start off on. So, and I think this is an important one. Because it's stuff we're gonna encounter. We're already encountering it, so that would be my 2 cents. We should work on that one. The next one, the next two are related, the year-round incentive model bylaw. I haven't really gotten into this myself too much, other than I think I'll go to the next one. Single family to multifamily conversion. This would basically address, the example is the old antique
Right.
house that's beautiful, but
Doesn't
how
work.
can we-
Economically, it doesn't work
yeah,
anymore.
so how can we allow that to be kind of chopped up interior to make it into multifamily apartments and so forth?
Mm.
So this one really addresses the site planning piece. The one before it, I think, goes with more just how do we incentivize it and create programs that help achieve that. So yeah, because right now you can't actually break up those apartments, and that's a great way to get the density without impacting the neighborhood. So everyone will think it's the antique house that's wonderful and nothing's changing from the outside, but yeah, now there's a bunch of units, so.
Paul,
Yep.
another process has question. So this is your list that we're keeping. I think if you're gonna present this to the board, selectmen, I think having two more columns, one talking about the effort to do this, and the other one would be how important it is. So just like a 1, 2, 3 scale, 1, 2, 3 scale. And then, then when we look, we can say, okay, we're taking 3 big projects and 4 small ones, as opposed to everyone says, oh, we want to do all of this, and that'll help us later on when we scale.
Yeah.
Because if they say, yeah, do it all,
Yeah.
well, then who does it come down to prioritizing what we do? Sort of.
Yep.
That's
Good.
my input.
Good suggestion. Next one down is related to the seasonal community, so anticipate that gets approved at town meeting. There are 2 things that towns who adopted are obligated to do, which is zone for tiny houses. And this is talking about houses on wheels, basically conversions, not small houses, so we have to allow for that somewhere in the zoning code. Which I think, so we're obligated to it anyways, but it's something we should do regardless, just to get ahead of it.
And there probably are some, because the state's requiring it, there probably some other model bylaw language, maybe.
Yeah, there hopefully will be some guidance.
I'd be interested in seeing how they distinguish tiny houses from RVs.
Mm.
Because RVs are all over town.
Yeah, and one other question I had on that was, well, how do we distinguish between, can houses on wheels also be ADUs? Like, how does this intersect with the?
Yeah, I don't know, forget to check the ADU by definition, but I don't know if it already distinguishes, I don't know. I mean, I know it doesn't list it specifically, but just by the way. ADU bylaw exempt from site coverage limits. So this was a recommendation that came from the Housing Trust when we the trust reviewed this year's proposed amendments. It was just a request to analyze if we exempt that from site coverage limits.
But not setbacks.
Well, that, no, that
I
was
think
part
the
of it.
concern was more that with site coverage limits and smaller lots. Because the site coverage limit,
Yeah, no, I agree with
Yeah,
it. I was
but-
just saying, but we're not gonna push back on setbacks.
we could look at it to see, but if that would make a difference too, but probably not. Because we want to preserve the
Oh,
buffer.
yeah, no, I like it. I think if you're building an ADU, building it closer to your primary is.
Yeah.
what you want.
The next two are kind of related, so. Look at, do we want to reduce the minimum lot size in residential? So right now it's the minimum lot size to create a new lot is 40,000, so you can't subdivide your lot. Unless you have 80,000 square feet.
Remember what year that went in?
88.
Thank you.
But as we know, the majority of the lots in town were created before that, so the majority of lots are between 20 and 30,000.
This represents about 15% of the lots.
And the next one, again, the other thing we're obligated to address if we adopt seasonal communities would be allowing development on undersized lots. So this is, it's related but different, but this would be lots that already exist that aren't developable under the current zoning. And I think the rationale is just smaller lots become developable, you can build a smaller house on a smaller lot. for
So
more
if you were,
affordable.
I'm sorry, if you were doing one, the first one, reduce minimum lot size. Excuse me, if you were doing seasonal communities, undersized lots, would you probably also want to address the other one at the same time?
I think it goes hand in hand, and I don't know if we, I don't think it means we have to do both. I mean, we may decide. Yeah, I think it makes sense to look at them together. The next one is another Cape Cod Commission model bylaw. This is basically form-based code light. It's what we're doing this year, but a simpler version that could be applied to residential districts. And I also think it could be applied to our District E, which is basically the area out here around Town Hall, the 7-Eleven, the post office, Buddha Bob's and so forth. This area is the only other commercial area, so we actually did, some of the components that are in this made it into our current bylaw, but this is really kind of, it's form-based code for residential, stripped down, simpler. And again, the discussion would be, do we want some consistency with Northeastham and the rest of the town and so forth, so.
And if we ventured into this, would we also be in a situation where we not only make a bylaw change, but we need to also institute design guidelines? Or is this so simple that you don't need design guidelines?
I don't think we would need the design guidelines.
Okay.
That would be a discussion we could
Okay.
have, but. Next one, another Cape Cod Commission, flood area design guidelines, so. These are this is a document that is best practices for how to design. In flood zones, in adjacent flood zone areas. I've tried to use it a few times just by way of reference for some of the ones with planning board that's come up, but. This would just be to look at those and kind of put them into the bylaw in some way so that they could actually be enforceable. So it really gets to how do you cite and locate a house? If it's going to be in a flood zone, which it is allowed now, we allow that. How do you cite it? It's more of design, site plan approval elements, aesthetics and so forth. But trying to get it so that it's also obviously safe and less susceptible to flooding.
I think one of the pieces that Paul has mentioned that he's tried but failed is that these guidelines would suggest that you, if you're on the water, you orient your house long ways as opposed to building it straight across, because the building it straight across sort of exacerbates the sort of
Yeah.
weather impact and
Pretty much, you go up to harm's way,
Mhm.
everything. That's exactly what we don't want. Everything that's on harm's way that has been redeveloped over the years is basically not what we want, but we've never had strong regulations to force that, or, so. Obviously, everyone wants their house to be along the, so you get all your windows and you're kind of broadside to the water, but that's actually counter to the. Yeah, so anyway, so that's just an example of like trying to avoid that in other parts of the town, so.
Would this be something that would also be supported by the COMCON?
Yes, so that actually is a segue to the next one, so
Okay,
the model floodplain bylaw, which this would be controlling, the first one is if it's gonna be built in this area, let's make sure it looks appropriate, neighbor character, and is safe, but the next one is, do we want to prohibit or more heavily regulate and control what can be built in the flood zone and adjacent areas? So this would be, and how do we treat historic structures, pre-existing structures? So what do we allow for new construction or substantial improvements? Do we allow them to build back what they have, or do they have to reduce size, relocate, move it away, manage, retreat? All these things are talked about in this bylaw. So it's, these things are set up to be kind of like, you can adopt the whole thing, or you a la carte take things that are appropriate for the town. So there's two pieces to this, that the model bylaw has a zoning piece and a conservation regulation piece. And I know we had a meeting with the commission and some conservation folks many months ago. I know that the idea was that this be done in tandem. So I have to check in with conservation to see if this is on their to-do list for this year. So then that would probably help inform our decision on that, but.
One of the things that I asked Paul, I said, does this exist? And he said, yes, and he said, that would be really helpful. There has been some geo modeling of the coastline and with predictions of erosion.
mhm,
And so we, I mean, I think this is sort of the importance of it, if we were to look at what are the erosion estimates look like for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out, that type of thing. And the other thing I think we might want to just get some background on is Wellfleet just went through a horrific legal and
Right.
public relations challenge with Blanche House.
Right.
And that went everywhere from, the community questioning, why did our planning board ever approve this house on the edge of the water? To when there was erosion, there was really legal debate or whatever about what could be done to prevent the erosion, and the solutions that kept getting proposed were going to exacerbate the situation. Then when they abandoned all of that, then there was a whole legal question that their zoning and bylaws had not estimated who's responsible if this falls in the water. I mean, so there was lots of public policy stuff that sort of
Yeah.
arose. I'd like to understand what were the issues, and I mean, they spent years and a lot of money in litigation. And, if we look at erosion, estimates, that certain of our beachfront may be, by the way, in the next 5 years. What are the policy implications? And some of these may not be even zoning related. I mean, we might make recommendations to say the town should have a set of policies that ask the question of who's responsible if something falls in the water, and, that type of thing. So this is a big issue, but I'm going to something next week in Provincetown. I will just say, in all the Cape Cod Commission and other stuff, this topic is like the one that's sparking. I mean, I probably get something every week on this topic, so I think whatever the data is showing, I'd like to see that. You were saying the data is available?
Yeah, well, the commission has on their site
On their website, yeah.
modeling
Modeling.
for sea level rise. I don't know if they have the modeling for the erosion rates, but yeah, a lot of
Okay.
data is available one way or the other. The other thing about this model bylaw is the commission worked with Eastham and and I think all of the other Cape Towns on this, so there's a lot of background work that's kind of already been done, research and everything, and they actually, so they have the model bylaw, they have the document that is the model bylaw, they have another companion document that is the kind of explanation of it, background kind of report on it. There's another document that they put together as a public outreach document, talking points and things. So it's kind of like this one, there's already a package of materials that we could use. And we have to debate whether it's appropriate for Eastham and all that stuff, but if we go forward, there's like already kind of a canned thing that we can use for communication and everything, so which I can share that with you if we decide to go further with it. But
Sounds like summer reading.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking there's both summer reading, and if we do the background reading, maybe maybe one of our first meetings, we get Cape Cod Commission staff on a Zoom to give us a complete briefing, and then we can.
Yeah.
have
And
one.
I think, yeah, we should do that if we decide with all the model bylaw stuff.
Yeah.
If the ones we decide to do, we should do that.
It's been very helpful.
So that's that one. The next one is site coverage neighborhood averages. So this gets to, we did all the work establishing the site coverage limits, but as we know, it's not a perfect solution. There's still a lot of subjectivity that gets into it. And I think what we're seeing is how do we control the first house in the neighborhood that wants to expand, and it's going to set the tone. So this is basically an idea of look at the data we have available, try to build into the bylaw some language that basically sets an upper limit based on the neighborhood averages, best available data for what the site coverage averages are, and then put a benchmark, say you can go whatever the percentage is, X% beyond, and try to calibrate it and make it more objective. So
So let's back in part from the first question. The first issue we were talking about as far as sorry. Well, no, I'm sorry. I don't remember.
The ADU,
Never mind.
the ADU exemption from site coverage.
No, I don't know what I'm saying.
That happens.
But
Yeah,
could those
Get
two,
used to it.
Doesn't get any better. I understand.
well, I think it will relate to the ADU discussion if we want to do that. I think it's just.
Just to remind folks, when we did the development limits 2 years ago, we were trying to set up two standards. One was an absolute maximum on development limits, and the other one was trying to get to this neighborhood impact. And we put in language in the intent that those two things were supposed to be equally considered. And we also put in some definitions of, well, what is the neighborhood? So we specifically defined it as a 300 square foot radius around a particular property. So we put those two things in. We went back and forth around, should we be more restrictive? And it was one of those things that we said, well, let's give the planning board some flexibility. They have to consider both of these, but we don't want to hamstring them with two numbers. We then followed up that with a workshop for the planning board with town council, which reiterated that these were supposed to be two equally valued considerations. I think the dynamics on the board is that when pushed with legal arguments from applicants that you don't have a criteria in which to establish this, our board has backed off. So there's this, and I will say this particular issue has been raised by planning board members. It's also been raised by select board members that this ambiguity here is not serving anyone, but just getting angry.
Yeah, I mean, the cases come in and you have a very objective means by saying, well, okay, by the standards that we had set before, it's like, okay, how should we go? But then when you have a neighborhood of similar size lots, small and moderate size, and you've got a few big lots in there. It's like, wow, according to the big lot objective criteria, I can go up to 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. And you're just saying that we should also consider size. Yeah, and there's nothing really objective about that. And it's just asking for trouble.
Mhm.
And we argue. So, it's one thing, if it's only one large lot in the entire neighborhood. One house probably isn't gonna change the character very much, but if you've got multiple lots, either existing or small houses at the moment, or finished lots that are large, that whole thing will look really different in 10 years. So, the things you're trying to avoid, what you're saying,
Yeah.
Next one is the open space residential development bylaw. This is the cluster bylaw that the thing we did to this a couple of seasons ago was we just expanded the use of it so it's available in basically all the districts. And this is the preferred alternative. So if someone is gonna subdivide, we don't want them to do standard cookie cutter 40,000 square foot lots. This allows you to preserve open space, cluster the buildings together, and obviously it's better use of the land because you're consolidating infrastructure and roadways and everything. So, but it provides a bonus. You can put more units in if you reserve above and beyond the minimum open space, but we don't have any language that talks about incentives for affordable housing. We didn't really touch it the first time around because we didn't know what was going on with wastewater and all that stuff. So, but this would be to revisit that if we want to and try to put some language in to address incentives for housing. And the last one, the motel, hotel, cottage colony conversion bylaw. This is basically, I think this one's pretty straightforward, but it would just be to put in some language that requires some long-term.
That's gonna be tough. When the real estate market crashes and I've got half my condo sold. What would be a possible
Well, right now,
path for the town?
they have to do it now. It's just that the issue has come up that we realized we didn't put any language that said how long do you preserve the affordability? I mean, under state financing standards, those are usually 40 years, but because we haven't said in perpetuity, we haven't said 40 years, we haven't said 20 years. It's another one of these, it's open for interpretation, and we don't.
Oh, I misinterpreted the whole.
It's the
I-
Collins Cottage.
I thought it was the conversion timeline. of
No,
how
yeah,
long you had
it's
to
the
do it.
Collins Cottage example we just went through. So it was, it started off with 20 years. We came back with a different year. We ended
Yeah,
up in
yeah.
perpetuity, but that was because it all worked out.
Yeah.
Everyone agreed, but that may not always be the case. So
Okay, totally misread that. I thought we were talking about,
So-
you get the permit, you get to sell everything
Oh,
within 3
right.
years, and I was getting.
So, a little bit, because I've been carrying this thing around that Martin wrote too, about, what,
Carrying around your words.
what happens, so right now, the cottage colony that's being converted to condos, the developer is saying everything is staying as it is. And if I'm reading this, but Martin's question was, what happens down the line as far as changing the size,
Oh,
shape, or
size, yeah.
location of these converted units? Once it's part of a condominium and an individual condo owner might say, oh, I want to expand,
well,
Well,
they
that's
could
the one.
they could do that as long as
Okay.
they're within, if they have site coverage expansion
something.
available to them.
And you also did an interpretation of in condos. the
And in this
documents
particular case,
define
I'll
the-
give you an.
Yeah, so if they create the condo and they've gone to the trouble of
Master deed
the
document.
master deed and the what is it, exclusive use area, like if they've actually done that, then that's what they would use. That's what they base their site coverage on.
Okay,
So in
Yeah.
the
If they don't-
Collins example, they are going to
Yeah.
limit the size and shape of the buildings and the colors and the paints being used
right,
in their condo
If-
documents.
in the condo docs, okay.
But if they haven't, if there's, and most of the cottage colonies around haven't done that, so basically, if we don't have that, then you revert to you divide the total lot area evenly and everyone gets an equal piece to expand, which works out because we don't want these cottages to be expanding into like
Right.
full on single family homes. It gives everybody a little elbow room to do a little bit of expansion, but it's supposed to keep these cottages small and modest and in line with what is there. So everyone has a little bit of elbow room to put an addition on or do whatever, but you can't blow the whole thing out and make, huge expansion. So that's already in the bylaw.
But this refers to what, this last one?
This would be to put language in, so if you're converting it, it basically is gonna spell out like. You're converting these from cottage colony to a residential, from a commercial use to a residential, you have to keep. They have to be either owner occupied or year-round rental. For 50 years in perpetuity, whatever the. Right now, that's
Right.
it's
the way we read-
open-ended.
The way we read the law, it looks like it's permanent. And then when they came back in the Collins said, oh, we'll limit the RTEs for 20 years. So that's where this came from. So now we need to put a number on the
Yeah.
books.
And I'll say that just as a add-on, so. This is pertinent to cottage, the Collins. This doesn't necessarily mean that there's gonna be a year-round residency there, and. The Collins cottage, those are gonna be somebody's summertime
Right,
Right,
But it's also
house,
60.
but it's not gonna be but they can't be short-term rent, so they can't buy
Yeah.
this condo and then short-term rent, so it
You-
solves that issue, but it doesn't. Just because someone's doing this conversion doesn't mean
Affordable
they're gonna be living there year round. Alright, so I mean, it's,
and we have it, that it's affordable house under the category, but why is it?
Because of
Business.
inclusionary zone.
Yeah.
They overlap.
Okay,
If you go to redevelop, you have to do 20%.
because it's preventing them from. Well, it's inclusionary and. And it's preventing the creation of short-term.
Short-term.
So I just threw it in affordable housing.
I mean,
Actually, that's the other thing. I'm glad you just said that because, part of this would be looking at tightening the language about whether or not it's existing dwellings or creating new dwellings, because that's actually the reason why this cottage example didn't fall under the inclusionary was because the zoning determination was that there are already units that existed.
right,
They're not building from scratch new units, so that would be a clarification we could look at. So that was just a matter of interpretation, but the interpretation went that it wasn't subject to the inclusionary.
so,
but, and that impacts, I mean, Collins Cottage is only 6 units. But if we start going up the road, Eagle Motel, I mean, you're getting into places that have 50, 60, 100
Yeah.
units, so the implications of this are.
Well, but that's a little, so that's a little different because like a motel is gonna be, those aren't dwelling units.
right,
The cottages are all different because they are dwelling units, the way they're defined. They have a kitchen, they're self-contained, they could be lived in as they are. So it's different in that regard, but we still should look at, do we want to tighten that up? Because the next cottage colony example, we do the same thing, like it has to do with the language in that bylaw and our definition of dwelling and cottage. We have to look at. So that was basically the argument that the attorney made is, you're saying this triggers with the creation of new dwellings. And when you look at the definition of dwelling and cottages, it doesn't. It's subtle, open to interpretation, but
so Collins ended up with the restriction in perpetuity.
yeah, they volunteered that anyway, so it worked out. That's what we wanted. But
We offered 99 years. And they said,
Let's go for it. Okay,
so that's,
see what happened in Hong Kong after 99.
you can only buy property, right, for 99 years.
so is there any one of these, maybe one way to look at this is starting with low hanging fruit. Is there any one of these that we think we should not consider for next year? It's not too important, it would be way too hard to do. There's no good background work. So I think we should try to
Right.
push off. Before we try and decide what we want to do.
I feel like I need more background
Right.
before I take anything out of
Okay.
this.
I didn't see anything to take
Yeah.
off either, so.
Do we want to open the floor for anybody who's brought some new topics today? Or is that too late, Paul?
No, this is still it's
Time to
friendly
do it.
dialogue.
So I'll take you a case from, did I already talk about this case about the new house that's being built on the seashore? The house that they wanted to move back. So you're familiar with that case, Paul, the one where they bought the lot from the town, went to town meeting. So they had a lot with the house eroding away, small house built in the 50s. It was like 900 square feet originally. And just sort of a bungalow, and that's eroding. Somebody bought that 3 years ago. And petitioned the town, went to the Board of Selectmen with a request to buy a piece of town property that sits here. And the town gave it to them at a very good deal, because they said we want to move our house back. Then they sold that property within the year, somebody else, and they basically came in with their architects and the builders and said, oh, this house isn't worth saving. We have a brand new house we want to build here on a piece of property that was owned by the town only 18 months earlier. So in my mind, on the creation of the seashore and the character of what we're supposed to be preserving in the seashore, this was a worst case scenario, to have allowed this to happen. But I don't know what we could have done as a town to have kept that from happening. We could have insisted on that. The only thing that could have been redeveloped on that lot should have been the cottage that was there. So bend over backwards to let people move cottages back away from the erosion. And this ties in with, the other issue about adopting, what we're gonna do. We were all thinking about the Bayside, but we're allowing houses to get moved every year on the inside of the seashore. So anyways, I just wanted to explore, is there something we could have done? Because to me, it felt like an abject failure of the zoning board. We tried to push back on them, and we did to some extent, but there's gonna be a new driveway cut into that house to the Pine Barren and everything else, because the road that accesses the house goes 300 feet along the cliff. So at the same time, the house is going to be gone, the entire driveway will be gone. And I questioned whether it would even survive the construction process. But anyways, that to me was a very bad outcome for the town, seashore, and the public. And I don't know if there's anything we could have done to.
But is that a zoning issue, or is that it should have been a contractual clause in the sale between the town and the
No,
owner
because
to put I don't know what the right word is, but a restriction or covenant on the land in perpetuity.
but that's the reason they bought it, was to move the house.
That's what I'm saying. The sale of that piece of property should have been contingent on a deed
So that's one
restriction, a
structure,
deed
Just
restricted,
for that structure alone.
or a structure of similar size.
Well,
And that was a
I
whole
don't
nother
think that's a
issue.
zoning
That was
issue.
then
I think
another
that's
issue is the timeline of when that house went from 900 feet to 1,700 feet was in dispute. So then when they got to do their 50% increase, they were able to base it up to 1,700, and now they're building something that's 2,100 square feet, starting off from the time the seashore was enacted, it was under 1,000. And seashore didn't push back hard enough either.
Well, that last issue was because the zoning board back, whenever that was, 20+ years ago,
Mistaken.
allowed that. Yeah, that was kind of a mistake, but.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
I mean, I think the issue you're raising is a subset of the larger issue of coastal resiliency,
Yeah.
because, I mean, we, for example, did buildable upland, we put that restriction in a few years ago. So what if someone today has buildable upland, they're on the water and they have 30,000 square feet, and that's their right, but over time with erosion, they have 20,000 square feet. And is there any legacy protection there? Can they rebuild as if they have 30, or is that stuff, where does the legacy protection come? I mean, we wouldn't want them to rebuild a huge house on an eroding block, but
That's what,
where's the enforcement, I guess? It's in the middle of
Well,
that.
Wouldn't that perhaps be part of the proposed topics that relate to the Cape Cod Commission and the overly, the things that relate to the COMCON and conservation.
No, I
think that's
agree,
both of
but I
those are
think,
part of
yeah, I
that.
think, yeah, what Martin is raising is sort of
Right.
loopholes and the.
And it's gonna happen more, I mean,
And it's
because
gonna
right,
happen a
'cause
lot
right
more.
now, you know, there's
Right.
only so many houses, what do we think? Some houses
Yeah.
on the bluff, it's only maybe a dozen. But we have a lot more on the bay, right, bigger.
Right.
If someone buys a small parcel of land next to them, then that,
Can they subdivide,
oh, not subdivide, but join them together.
Join them.
And then use.
Merge
the-
them.
the joint, because that's what happened in this case.
and
That's also an opportunity to kind of address possibly take this out of like a variance, because that's how these things are gonna come into the zoning board. They come in because they need a variance for height, because they gotta raise the building up or move it closer to the setbacks to get away from the bluff. So these things come in on a case-by-case basis because they're looking for a variance and they have to prove a hardship. But it gets into a lot of,
And the hardship is that their particular plot is, you know, suffering in a way that's different from the rest of the neighborhood.
yeah, it has to be a unique
It's unique to their,
situation.
to their lot.
But it could be an opportunity to kind of get things codified in the bylaw so that it's not, and maybe these things don't require variance because we're already addressing it proactively in the bylaw and putting the parameters on that we want, so it's like, you know, because again, it's just, it ends up being case by case in a board, and then you get turnover in a board that feels differently 2 years later, or whatever, and then you get these mishmash of different
Not-
decisions.
Not only that, but if they're, when we have a bad storm and we have multiple projects all coming at us at once. And there's gonna be a lot of sympathy, and if it all becomes up under judgment, and I've got 6 cases per month. And you have 6 cases per month, it's gonna be really difficult, so having these things codified now will be a lot easier.
Yeah, the real, I understand the hardship component of it, if I was the one in the house. But then again, if I was buying a house like right on the water, I should have thought, I would harsh comment, but I should have thought of that in my house. We all know that the oceans are rising, at some point in the future, this is gonna be a problem. And it's kind of a risk you take. It's-
Okay.
If you get 30, 40 years out of it, good for you. If you get 2 years out of it, you probably should have been a little more alert to that when you bought it. You know, that's. I don't know how many, you pilloried for that, I mean, it's just my attitude, there's no
Paul
surprise.
got a call from a guy with a house like literally falling in the water. And this is where some people have just crazy. He had done the math. He just wanted to know, can I get 6 years? Because he'd done the cash flows. If I get 6 years, I can make it. So, I mean, we're not buying houses with a 6-year useful life, but there are people who.
I figure my house is situated right in between, the bay and the ocean just. I'll be the last one to
Yeah.
leave. You know?
Me too, but I'm on a little rise, so.
So it sounds like this Cape Cod Commission model floodplain overlay just
It's a big
is
deal.
gonna, it would be a big deal, and it would, as long as, if we're gonna look at it, it would take in a lot of these things so that we're ahead of the game a little bit.
Yeah, and I think if we chose to do that one, I think the flood design guidelines is just something that you kind of attack. I mean, that documents existed, it is what it is. We either adopted the whole thing or parts of it, but that kind of gets tacked on, like, here's the bylaw. It's kind of like similar to the design guidelines.
Yeah.
Like, here's the bylaw and here's the design guidelines that go with it. So like that part is, I don't think that part's not a lot of lift to that. It's just like, it's just.
And
You
with
attach
those
that.
decide, I remember there was a lot of back and forth about a property that. And I may not get this exactly right, but the pilings and the COMCON didn't like the
Yeah.
material being used.
Yeah, that sounds right.
It
Is that-
sounds
that's
like,
on
It's on
Harm's
Harm's Way, okay. And back and forth, with the design guidelines, if they had existed, be helpful in that situation, so we wouldn't get into. It seemed like retrospective gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
would help. That was an issue between the local conflict regs and state building code.
Right,
Yes, it would be helpful. I don't know if it would have
solve the problem.
resolved it, but.
I just want to bring to people's attention, I don't know if anyone is on Commonwealth. The Commonwealth, newsfeed, Commonwealth, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
It's Mass Inc. does it, anyways, they're sponsoring something which I signed up for, it's next Wednesday night, it's free. It's at the Provincetown Town Hall, it's called No Man is an Island, the Collective Climate Challenge of Coastal Massachusetts.
Oh,
So,
Can you forward that to us?
I'm trying to think of how I forward it, it's in my calendar.
Just invite us.
Well, you'd have to go to their thing.
what is it, the
Did
Commonwealth?
you make a
Yeah, it was free. Let's see, where's this? This event is created from an email you received. Let me see if I can put this email.
Wednesday, it's at P-Town Town Hall.
But what's
Downtown
the name of the organization?
Commonwealth.
Yeah.
Commonwealth is the news feed
Oh,
of
okay.
Mass Inc.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
So is it this coming Wednesday or the
It's
week?
coming Wednesday.
Okay.
Week from today.
So I've got it in my calendar. Now I have to find the, let me see if I can find the, actual.
Paul, I haven't, another topic I see, more and more shipping containers on lots. You know, typically you see it as a temporary thing when someone's doing a big renovation. No big deal, it's every 6 months. But sometimes you see 1, 2, then 3 of them. And we have rules about trailers, mobile homes, boats and so forth. Are those covered? Some of that I've missed.
Well, in order to address that, to stop that, we need to have a definition of shed. Because the reason those are being allowed is because they can be considered shed, so they're meeting setbacks.
How many sheds?
200 square feet, is it right? I think that was the definition of shed.
No, we don't, we'd have to tighten it up. That's been a discussion in the office too about.
Okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Oh, well,
Yeah, we get a lot of complaints about it, and I think a lot of times they get a building permit can be gotten, because it's a temporary building permit, I should say, which is good for 6 months, but can be renewed at the discretion of the building inspector.
Yeah.
But then the discussion, well, what is it why is
Oh,
it
yeah,
temporary?
yeah, and I'm the same way. If anything is, you know, whatever it takes to build a house is a year to 18 months to 2 years.
But
when you get beyond that, you're like, now you're impacting the neighborhood, you know.
But if there's no building permit associated with, you know, you're getting a temporary building permit to put this thing on, but then where's the building permit for the house you're building? Like, this things that need to be tightened up, and this
So is
is
it a
kind
good
of,
example to put on here, or is it something that happens, you're gonna have to do administratively?
no, I think it's something we could consider, that if we get the language in there, put some arms around this thing, then the enforcement and the interpretation isn't as subjective.
Right, because I think we spend a lot of time talking about, you know, whether you have a dormer or what type of, you know, window clusterings you have and so forth. Because we're concerned about this, that the character of a neighborhood, and then somebody at the end of the corner has 2 shipping containers on his front lawn. That impacts the character.
Yeah, I just, to be honest, it's been a struggle to deal with those. Because we don't have clarity in the bylaw about what is an accessory, what is a shed, what is, you know. And I think these can be,
So I vote we add that to the list.
Okay. I have another one that I raise periodically, which has to do with fencing. I'm noticing that a lot of lots are starting to put solid fencing right in front of their homes. very prominently. And, you know,
That's to hide the big pool they put on the front lawn.
I know, but it's the, you know, it's the notion of the ambiance of Eastham of having green space in front of your houses. So we don't even have restrictions that say, yeah, you can put a fence, but you have to put some foliage in front of it. Some of
I
these.
thought we had a limit as the fence can only be 5 feet, if it's on the property.
Paul? You have a limit?
No,
On property
you
line?
can put that on the property line. It can't be more than 6 feet.
So there's the issue of landscaping and fencing. There's the issue of type of fencing. I haven't seen it yet. No, I've seen it one place in Eastham. But it just struck me. I don't think of Yarmouth as having a lot of character.
My daughter lives in
There
Yarmouth.
are characters that are.
There are characters there, but I was on my way to my brother's house who lives there, and I went through what is the historic district. It's a little green and a 1700s town hall, and I thought, oh, this is really cute. And as I went through the intersection, I noticed that on the left-hand side, a subdivision had gone in, okay? And they took, in this historic district, right to the curb, white vinyl fencing that went for at least a quarter of a mile down the road. And I'm driving and I'm, you know, going through this thing saying, oh, this is so intimate, cute, you know, whatever.
And then
And
solid.
then fencing for a quarter of a mile, I was like, oh my God, that's,
It starts to take on a look.
and takes on a
Century or
look, it
something.
really impacts the look of the place, so.
Is that
Again,
off 6A, son? Was that off 6A?
it's off, no,
On the base side or the sound side?
it's on the south side.
Oh.
You get off where
28.
Patriot, I think it's, no, that's
That's
Dennis.
9, yeah.
Exit 75.
They,
You get off and then you go down, it's,
It's the mark.
you take a right on a small road. I am gonna take a video next time I go to visit my brother. I'm just gonna take a video because I was
Yeah.
just
No,
so.
I know, that's why, and that's why we put, when we did the zoning, you know, I put in the no solid
No,
vinyl.
so
can't
solid
fencing,
panel.
because it's hard.
Yeah, so there's a combination of, you know, tightening up the fence limits, thinking about, do you require some landscaping if you're gonna do the front of your property? And then other prohibitions about, I mean, I don't know if I wanna get, you know, people like vinyl fencing, whatever, you could have, just put the whole wall of vinyl fencing in the front of a neighborhood is kind of, and I think we only have a couple instances of it now, so
Yeah,
is
you-
this
we
something
could-
we
yeah,
get ahead
Yeah,
of,
so
head
it's
of?
research, I think, even if you do something like it, you can't have a solid fence for more than 40 feet, or some limit like that, or
Right.
they gotta do something interesting, because you're right, when it just looks so industrial like.
That was a subdivision, I mean, that's why they got the length, but anyways, so if we could put fencing on there. That would be helpful. Anything else that has sparked you guys in the planning board? We covered the waterfront.
No, it's funny, it's some of these things come up because you have something on the books and it works for 10 years and someone finds a loophole. Does something really egregious, but there's no way to stop it, and then it ends up here, because it's like, wait, we found a loophole, but people have to test you. On something before it becomes an issue,
right,
you know?
I didn't put it on the list, but it's been on the past, the storage of the RVs and the trailers.
Storage of
But then
RVs,
I guess you
yes.
could put boats in. Right now, you need permission from the select board, but there's no parameters around it, so when it's come up, I just try to, and then the select board really don't. So it's two things, like
Does anybody?
getting
do
it out of the
do
select board purview, because they don't know what to do with it. And should probably go to the zoning board, but then when they do come, I just treat it like, use the criteria from the zoning board. So it's just kind of like, it always falls in the middle and,
So if I have like just a camper van. And I park in my, and I use it twice a year, I need a permit from the select board to have it in my driveway. That's the way I read it. And then I'm like, I know a dozen people, and I've never ever heard them talk about getting a permit. So if it's not enforced, as soon as we try to enforce it, a lawyer's gonna say, this is arbitrary on applying this rule to me. when you've only given 2 permits out in the past 5 years or something. Like if
Well,
they
if
were-
it's a change of regulation,
But it's in the books now.
yeah, but if we were to modify it, then it could be
Yeah.
considered new.
I think. Yeah, but it gets tricky too, because then it's like, well, you can't live in it, that's already. Established, but then it's like, but,
You're not supposed to live there.
right,
It's not a dwelling.
but, we just get questions of like, my brother-in-law's coming for a month, he's parking it there,
Or I rented
they're
cars-
staying in the driveway, I mean, it's like,
I've Airbnb my house for 2 months and I'm gonna
Yeah,
stay in my
so-
friend's backyard on my camper van.
the bylaw is, the only language in the bylaw is like, kind of like you're storing it, like you're parking it for the season. I'm done using it for the year, like you need a permit approval for that, but then it gets into all this stuff about like, yeah, people are visiting in the RV and it's gonna be parked in the driveway for X amount of time. At what point is it there
Oh, yeah, I think-
permanently, semi-permanently, a week, a month? I mean, the stuff that,
It turns into a guest house.
Well, but I mean, I got one around the corner from me that has an enormous RV. And it's used every summer, because it's Firebird baseball kids.
Oh,
Yay.
I love the Firebirds, and I never wanted to like say, oh. But
Pay for the rule breakers, really?
Pay for the Firebirds.
Boats though, too, there's plenty of people that. It's not something that they may not have a slip any place, so you pass the park it on their property somewhere. They never actually use it, it becomes a lawn one they've had for a few.
Well, we're also, this is Eastham, and this is a very rural community, for hundreds of years, and a farming community. And we're applying typical suburban rules and regulations, and I think we have to because of the growth that's here in many, many cases. But when it comes to a lot of topics, it's a lot of fishermen in town, it's, all types of people that have 4 or 5 trailers in the yard. So
Although,
addressing it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we also have to realize, this is a rural community, not a suburban community.
although I would say with the boats, there was one boat. Some controversial project that had me drive down Hay Road. And someone had not a fishing boat, someone had a really souped up cruising boat. But it was like, the house is here, it's sat right in front of, like, when you drove down the street, you saw the boat. You kind of had a look to see the house, and I'm thinking, if I lived across the street, that would be obnoxious to be looking at a boat.
I don't know. And if I moved into a suburb outside Boston, I would think the same thing. But if I moved 110 miles away from Boston, I'm like, oh, that's cool, that guy's building his boat. There's 2 different ways of looking at it.
right,
I mean, there's always examples. In fact, when I lived in the suburb outside of Boston, there was a guy with a 60-foot sailboat around the corner from me in our subdivision. And that was his retirement when he had that. But anyways, I digress. I'm just saying it's gonna be an interesting conversation.
well, and sometimes it also is Kevin was saying, is because whether or not the boat is actually really a boat. When we bought our house, the people right behind us had a huge boat in the backyard that was not seaworthy at all, it was rotten. It was up on stilts, and I mean, it was huge, all you could see was the
I
boat.
have fuel at my front lawn.
Yeah, and, I thought it was a great lawn ornament, actually, I enjoyed watching
There
it.
was a person on Route 6, I can't give you the actual address, that had a boat there for years. And it clearly was not seaworthy, but they actually made it a decoration, at least
That was the one,
outlined with
Yeah,
lights.
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
through the
yeah.
holidays. Then this year it was going like. "Oh, the
Well, I
boat."
know, when my neighbors took theirs down, I was like,
If you thought you've touched the third rail of politics in town before, this is the real third rail.
yeah,
We could have high-rise, low-income housing before we're gonna be able to fix this.
but is there
yeah, it
anything
comes
that,
up a lot, especially the lobster pots, the lobster traps.
Oh,
people-
yeah,
it's
20,
like,
30 feet of lobster traps?
Yeah, but
yeah.
it's like.
It's
you
part of
live in
the,
Cape
yeah,
Cod, East Town.
yeah.
Yeah, Whimsical is one thing, but it goes over a certain size.
Yeah.
But the comment that you were making, Paul, about the shipping containers, is there something there that would be helpful to you for us to do? It seems like it's already there.
I don't, I think we have to, right now, those are being allowed because there's nothing to differentiate those from a shed.
Okay,
Just like That's what people say, I need storage, like, I don't wanna spend a bunch of money on a cute Pine Harbor shed, I can get this thing for dirt cheap, and I just wanna keep my stuff in it. And there's so, as long as they're meeting the setbacks and everything, they get a building permit, and so I think there's different things I was trying to say, it comes up for different reasons. Some people just say, I wanna use this as my shed, it's gonna be there, not moving it. Other people come in and say, well, it's temporary because I'm building my house, and then they get a temporary building permit that's good for 6 months. But then they don't start working on the house, and then 6 months goes by and you can renew it, and renew it's at the discretion of the building inspector, but. So that's more of an internal thing, I'm trying to figure out, like, there should be a building permit that goes with the temporary building permit, and when. And if there's no forward motion, then you shouldn't keep renewing your, so there's some loopholes and things that are just, but I think it starts with. When and where do we allow, if at all, these metal storage containers? I think it's reasonable to say, yeah, if it's part of an active. Building site and you're using it for equipment and things, but if. Other than that, it gets into an aesthetic thing, so we don't have a definition of a shed, it has to be. You know,
Yeah.
what we think of as a garden shed.
Made out of wood.
It's almost, you could almost create.
But I mean, it
we
goes
could just-
down-
We could just ban these, we could be very specific about it.
That's
A
the
metal
easiest
structure
thing.
used for, a shipping,
I mean, that's basically the answer to it.
that they
It's
can't be
just-
used for more than, 10 or 12 months, something like that.
That's basically the
And if
simplest
we
way
end
to
up
address it.
doing-
It's just-
Any type of, design work, form-based code design work. in a
Residential.
Yeah,
neighborhood.
we could
We
slide
could
something
slide
like that.
something like this in.
So probably not a lot of lift there either, it's just mainly on kicking it around and.
Yeah. Same thing, I don't mind seeing one tucked behind a restaurant or a commercial building where there's sort of, they need places to store stuff there. Okay. It's not-
And I mean, but we're guilty of it too, we have two out here in the corner, which. Have
Yes.
archival records, which. I. Said, was above my pay grade, but we should at least be having a piece of fence or something to screen it, but we're right out here with two things.
Right.
But man, there's nowhere else to put the. Stuff.
So back to this model floodplain overlay district and what Mary referred to. I pulled around a little bit, massinc.org/events has it too.
Massink, Massink is the parent company.
Right,
Commonwealth is just the,
so it
magazine.
used to be a magazine, yeah.
Yeah,
So
Commonwealth
it's-
magazine,
yeah.
they did.
So it's 7 to 8 next
I
Wednesday.
just sent everybody an email with a link to it,
Oh,
Did
to
you-
register.
Register.
If you
way
want.
too productive.
I know, I know.
We're just talking
Good.
about sheds.
If we could, I'd like to move on because there's another, could you throw that agenda up there one more time? Paul? We've got about 45 minutes. Upcoming schedule, we'll just quickly, Paul, we have, the, pre-town meeting is what night? Is that?
Last
It
night,
was last
Right.
night.
Jeez,
how'd it go?
I go.
Pat was there, no questions,
No,
no questions on the zoning.
Okay.
no.
Were there any questions much at all? It seemed to go really fast.
Yeah, there was discussion
The
about that
RT.
particular
Again?
article and
Yeah.
some discussion on 580 Massasoit Road.
And a little
Project.
bit on the communities, the
Seasonal.
seasonal communities, by one guy who thought it was too much government overreach. So, yeah,
Actually, the important thing, though, I think, I'm glad the select board addressed it, is because this actually solves the problem, like, it's actually kind of the opposite, because to do all these things that the seasonal communities that allows the town to do, they have to be done individually by doing these petitions, these home
the
rule
home
petitions.
petitions, yeah.
So it actually, which is what we're doing now, every time we wanna, you have to do a home rule petition, like it's more government red tape, and then it takes years, so it's actually the opposite of what that person's understanding was, so.
Right,
Did he have a specific thing that he opposed in the seasonal communities or just generically the
It's
concept?
just more
it's
generic.
generic.
Okay.
How long did the meeting last? Was it on channel 8?
Till,
I tried to find it.
Tell about what I left
7:30.
7:30-ish.
Oh, it wasn't on there.
There's an issue going on with Channel 8, technical glitch. They don't have their live feed going on, like on the
Oh.
television. You can still use the streamings on the YouTube channel, but
Oh, I didn't think about doing that.
yeah, they were just telling me about that yesterday. Channel 8 has not been working for a few weeks, some
Okay.
issue.
Did the planning board have a discussion about the zoning yesterday? I mean, on the 16th?
Yes, so we went over the proposed floor amendments
Mhm.
to make those changes to Trade
Yeah.
Park. And those were endorsed. So when the, at town meeting, whichever select board member is making that motion, they'll make the motion to approve it as written in the bylaw, subject to, and then they'll go over those two technical changes, and then we'll have the vote all in one go.
Okay,
So there's nothing else in this year's current work that needs attention until after the town meeting.
No.
Well,
Uh.
Paul kept the planning board hearing open.
Oh, right.
So that they haven't adopted the design guidelines, but at their next meeting, which would be May
21st.
21st, they would then adopt it.
After town.
only
After
only
town.
if town hall was successful.
Yeah,
Town meeting
town
was
meeting.
successful.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
What was the date of that next meeting?
May 21st.
So the other thing that I talked to town council about, just with the ADU bylaw, assuming that passes. I'm gonna send like an explanatory memo to the AG's office. That describes specifically why we're keeping that year-round occupancy requirement. And why we're just so that we don't, just to be proactive about it in the hopes that they'll understand the rationale rather than just leave it up to their.
Right.
There's another piece to that memo, the year-round and the. Anyways, a memo will go, usually we just send the package up and they look at it, but I want to go the extra step to say, this is why we're doing this, so just. Make sure we can keep that language.
So we have,
Okay.
we have obviously town meeting May 5th. Planning board would, on the 21st. I'm actually gonna be out of town on the 21st, so,
Yeah, I don't think
I
the
don't
board, I
think it's gonna
mean,
be an issue, but
Pat and Kevin can speak for themselves, but I think there weren't any really opposition to anything in the document. I'm gonna assume it gets approved, but I think it was just. Let's wait till after town meeting and see what
Yeah.
shakes out. But
okay. And, so after the 21st, we don't have anything official scheduled. So we could go on summer hiatus.
Yay,
Start reading material.
So we just, we'll
summer reading.
get you all kinds of stuff for summer reading. And then regroup in September.
But the decision about what we're gonna cover, do we wanna make that before?
Well, I think if we get a lot of information, maybe we need early September to ratify the list and then get on the select. I mean, we can kind of do this concurrently. I mean, there's certain things that the select, we can start doing our readings. We can start setting up if we want Zoom presentations by different people, and then just get before the select board.
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought this was going to the select board in the next couple of months. Are you gonna hold on to this till September?
so,
First to do, well, we want to.
well, we should just talk about, because we always run out of time. So, I think the select board. Probably in August or September are going to be working on that's when they work on their select board goals.
Yeah.
From the staff, I know Jackie and I are gonna try to make sure that their goal, we get the strategic plan update, so we wanna make sure like. These things flow together. Basically, we got till the end of December. After December, we're into the. We gotta have drafts and the warrant articles and so we have a limited window to like do the actual work. And so I would say it'd be good to get our list to the select board at least in August before that, so that they have this list, so that they can,
Coordinate it with the
Know what-
strategic plan.
yeah, and then they can figure out, are any of these things on their priority list or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, whatever, but just so that's kind of lined up.
And then depending on what we decide to focus on, that will impact the recruiting for new members. If we
Well, we should talk about that next.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess,
Oh, sorry, Mary, just, I guess there's two ways, so we have this list. We can send this to the select board with what this group has prioritized, or just do it the other way, like, what do you want?
I think we should try to prioritize it.
Yeah, I do too, yeah.
And then out of that, you could get what the select board feels most strongly about it.
Yeah, and I thought that's what was, when I mentioned earlier about, talking about the effort
Yeah.
and the impact.
Yeah.
I thought that was enough of prioritizing for us. I think for us to say, you know, here's how much work this will take, and here's the, whatever the second
Impact.
topic was. I think it's up to them then to look at everything and say, oh, here's what we want to do, here's, you know, I don't feel as our board that we should be saying, oh, here's the 10, and here's what we think are the top 5.
But that's what we've done in the past.
Yeah, it sounded like when we first got formed, that was, as I recall. There was a whole list of issues that were in the meetings that we had as a task force was trying to put priorities to, and that's.
And not necessarily say this is number 1, 2, 3, but chunk it into high, medium, and low. Right,
Yeah,
right,
either
High, low.
gold, silver, bronze,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
how do people feel? I mean, I feel some of these things, I want to get more information before I said saying
Yeah.
we should definitely do this. I mean, we could meet mid-August. And for the explicit goal of saying, let's put something on the table. But I don't know where people are, you taking
I
off?
can do Zoom.
You do Zoom?
Yes, I am taking off, but I can do Zoom.
How do people feel about mid-August to prior to get
Yeah, I
this
agree, because that gives us time to do our own reading,
reading? Yeah.
and I think that, you know, I'm happy to come back and see the, you know, and review it, that would be sort of quick to review and say, hey, here's how we're categorizing it, do you agree, disagree?
I think I don't have air conditioning in my house, so make it 2 hours. Here, so a little bit of relief.
Have the meeting in the gazebo. Across the street.
No, we need Zoom. At the library.
We got
Okay.
our phones for it.
I know, yeah.
All right, so looking at schedules.
Any chance we can get away from Wednesdays? I'm like triple booked on Wednesdays.
You triple booked on Wednesdays. I think we're agreeing that this time slot, 10 to 12, looks better than the 5 to 7.
Amen.
So,
I don't care.
I don't care.
so. Paul, do you have a set vacation schedule? You know,
No, August shouldn't be,
You're not,
How
he's not privileged to know yet.
well, we have to take our vacations, and we used to go at the end of August, but now all the kids are doing the sports, so all their preseason. We used to like to go at the end of August when it's,
Right.
but now, so we're doing it in June, seriously.
Then they get on the select teams, and then
Yeah.
then your whole summer's gone.
Yes.
So I don't, yeah, August shouldn't be a problem.
the 19th? The Tuesday? Okay. I can't do the previous Tuesday, but I can do Monday, the 18th, or are you out that week?
No, I'm just saying,
Monday, the 18th,
Yeah, it works for me.
10 to 12?
that's all right. 10 to 12.
I'll be sitting at the harbor, so I don't care.
My calendar's not coming up. Yeah, we can meet
Monday,
next, we'll meet next door. Someone's in this room, but we can meet next door.
Monday, the 18th from 10 to 12, and we can prioritize, what goes to the select board. And if we're, I mean,
Yeah, no, that sounds
and
good.
then,
Mhm.
I mean, we could, you know, theoretically get it to them their first meeting after Labor Day.
Well, if we come up with something, when will they be doing goal setting, Paul? In August?
I don't know exactly when it'll be on the agenda, but it's gonna be end of August or September.
So after we have our meeting.
Yeah.
And you and Paul can get it together.
Okay.
You just go ahead and
Yeah.
send it.
All right, so Monday the 18th. Okay, terrific.
And we'll get some reading ahead of time.
Oh, yeah, I'm making a list of things I want to Paul and start.
Hey, Paul, if we, sorry, Mary.
uh,
I was gonna say, if we go to the Cape Cod Commission, we can find these model bylaws, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I can send out the links to I'll,
Yeah, they've got tons of stuff on their website.
and also the studies that back up some of the stuff in the analysis.
and I'll also figure out, I'll talk to conservation, see if they're
Yeah.
gonna do their part of it this year or not.
I mean, things I have on my list is, some of you have seen this, but, the strategic plan is about to be, is that adopted or is it supposed to be finalized?
Content's done, we'll
Content's
be
done.
doing public info session in May.
In May, probably, okay.
Yeah, I
And
would
then-
urge you to come.
May, what dates?
Don't know, I'm waiting on two, it's either gonna be the 14th or the 22nd, Wednesday or Thursday, I gotta finalize that.
Yeah.
We're basically looking to get it like adopted by the select board in July to line up with the fiscal year.
And there are zoning recommendations in the strategic plan. I'm on the committee. And I'm doing this from memory at the moment, but I think what we've covered is
Is in there?
in there.
Okay,
I don't think there's anything we haven't talked about
so we have
from a
strategic,
zoning perspective.
strategic.
All
plan.
the big items on here are in the strategic plan. I didn't put all like
Yeah.
the storage containers, things
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
but the floodplain stuff, the
Yeah.
major form-based code stuff are all action items in the strategic plan.
So there's that report. I think it would be great for folks to get a copy of the Seasonal Communities Act. And then when the regulations come out, they're working, that would be good. I don't know if there's a good summary of the housing bond bill. The assessing department. 3 years ago, we did a lot of, analysis, Paul. We should go back and look at that analysis because we went in and sliced and diced this, Jim Killian did for us. We got a real good sense of what, and we had this map too. What percentage of lots were 10,000, 30, 20,000, 30,000, where was 40,000, where were they? So as we start thinking about lot sizes and setbacks and making changes, it'd be just good to revisit that map.
And yes, and that related to the ADU.
And the ADU as
Yeah.
well. And then, again, anything around coastal resiliency, if there's, you know, any mapping, that'll come up with the model bylaws, that would be important. So. So we have a quick discussion about, membership. We are unique in that, and I've asked the select board to talk to the governance committee. The select board has made it clear to me that they appoint our members. The general process that people are applying to is the governance committee.
Search,
Search-
this
search
group
committee.
doesn't go through the normal.
We don't
search
go through the normal search. Having said that, they're looking for recommendations. I thought today we might talk about what skill sets, not necessarily particular people, that we have the ability under the original establishment to bring 3 more people in. I think it would be very good for us to get 1 or 2 at least in here. But, I mean, I'll just start, I find it might have been useful to have someone with architectural background as we start doing design and start looking at different things. That was one thing. If we start doing a lot of coastal resilience stuff, again, I don't know if there's someone on the environmental related groups we have. We have, climate action committees, et cetera. If someone has, we haven't had a strong environmental voice on this task force for a while, forever. So I sometimes wonder when we make recommendations, are we missing something because that voice isn't there? So those were the two that struck me, an architect or a contract, or someone who has construction background. The only thing I hesitate is, if we have someone who's an active business person whose interests, who's voting on their interests, it's a little awkward. And I'll give you an example. Jeff Cusack, who's a realtor.
It's the last word I just wrote there.
He was so conflicted. He would agree with us and say, oh my God, like his constituency or his peers.
Yeah.
He was always conflicted because he didn't feel like he represented that. He was sympathetic to what we were trying to do, but it was kind of contrary to his interests. So he struggled a lot with that.
Hmm.
And I, if someone has a real estate background from a different town or,
It just doesn't do
Retired.
business in Eastham. That's
if you're
the
currently
deal.
doing business in Eastham, I think it's really hard to stop putting these regulations around when you have an interest, but that's just my thought.
Well, I think the way that this year particularly, I think that we worked around that issue was outside of the actual meeting, Paul doing individual discussions with experts, who are
Yeah.
from a business perspective
Yeah.
to get input, so that we're getting the input and the information without them having to be conflicted with trying to decide between what's good for the town and what's good for their own personal business.
Right, right.
I think we need the input.
And that's what I wrote down here too, is, what we want is the technical input. So do you want an engineer, do you want a builder, or do you want a realtor? And they're all sort of have the same alignment and, they're all sort of in the land development space. I would lean towards the engineer myself.
Do we have one though?
Yeah, I'm an engineer. I'm an electrical engineer. I'm a data specialist. I'm a network security engineer, but I'm not a building engineer.
Right.
The realtor component, again, Jeff's situation notwithstanding. It seems they should be represented somehow, give us insight on marketability and if in the real world, if they're developers, they're looking to do something, they might talk with realtors as to what's available, maybe the skinny on this, that, or another thing. To get that perspective, I think is helpful, but like you say, how do you find someone who's not doing business in these teams so they can be honest with their opinions and not feel like they can be blacklisted by their workers,
Right.
But I think that perspective is missing.
And I just say, I would defend Jeff a little bit. I think Jeff is probably as good as you get.
Yes.
To get a realtor on the board,
Yes.
somebody who went to high school here, he grew up here. He raises, that's his life here.
Well, he's now on the Affordable Housing Trust.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
we're still getting his input.
So I think we'll talk to, I think that's, if we think of other people that join this, and towards the engineering side. What about a builder?
Well, I mean,
It's the same thing.
it's kind of the
Retired,
same.
we need a retired builder.
I mean, what we,
Retired builder, retired
the thing is, we had some really good conversations last summer with Ted Malone, who does affordable housing, Bart Mitchell from Community Builders. So the people that are in that mixed development slot, we probably can get their opinions. I
Right.
mean, I remember when Ted Malone came, he brought his architect. And he gave us great insights in terms of mixes and profitability and what you needed to do and what the state wanted to do. But his architect kept sitting there and she was going into the weeds of our dimensional table saying, oh, you need this percentage here, or this is already covered in the building code. Like, she had great, like, I think at one point I said, would you just come in? She lived somewhere else, but I just found her insight incredible.
Well, and that's where I think us making the commitment to reach out beyond the people sitting around this table for input and advice and counsel
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah.
Just like we've used the Cape Cod Commission in a similar kind of way with their expertise.
So I think, do you want to try to find like, at-large members in the community that have the skill set, or do you want to invite a rep from these other committees, like,
Mhm.
or, I guess it depends on how many folks you want to add in. I mean,
Right.
if someone from Conscom or Open Space or Climate Action to represent that piece, or just try, I guess that's another thing. It's just,
But see, I gotta say, as someone in the management of the group, the skill set is important, but the person is incredibly important. I've met with, Jeff, at the end of the day, it wasn't his conflict, it was our workload.
Right.
There's a lot of people, when they see the workload and the intensity we work at, it's too much.
Mhm.
And I've had a bunch of people like that,
Well, we get June and July off.
So-
But I do think that's right, and I think that having people on this group who think strategically and not, we have to be way down in details, but not in the weeds. There's two different, in my mind, they're kind of two different things. I think it's, Paul, to answer your question from my perspective, it's someone who has knowledge about coastal resiliency and that whole environmental area from a technical perspective and a knowledgeable perspective, so that they can provide input and advice. I think not only is helpful on some of the things we're going to be taking up, but again, if they sort of meet the other definition, they think strategically and broadly about the community. I think if we could find someone like that, that would be awesome. I don't know if we can, but.
well, can I leave it that, we talked a little bit here. Can I leave it that if you, I'll work with Paul to try to mine through who might be
Right.
raising their hand, a past member, current member of a certain committee that might fit the bill. But if you come up with ideas, please let me know. I'd very much like to have some preliminary discussions with people. Here's what we're doing, is, the work, the commitment, et cetera.
I think that's helpful.
Start doing that early vetting, I can do that.
Having I've done that with the
Yeah,
trust,
yeah.
just having early conversations with people and.
Yeah.
I also think it's difficult to do, but to have someone, how do I want to say this, from a younger generation than us,
Yeah,
that has a vested interest in the future 20 years beyond ours.
yeah.
The only problem with that is meeting 10 to 12 on a weekday, if they're working, is difficult. So keeping that in mind. We happened to find somebody for the trust recently who fit that younger generation and passion about housing, and is in the position to be able to come during the day on a limited, well, not limited, but on a very specific timed basis because of the work that they're doing.
There was a very articulate young woman at the
Yeah.
public hearing with short blonde hair, and she
Right.
was a young person. She was so good.
She was,
And she kept saying, I need to be more involved.
Right.
I'm gonna live here for the next.
yeah, we did talk to her after the meeting to try to encourage her to join a committee. I haven't heard anything from her, but
Do you not remember her name at all?
I think it was Julia, but I wouldn't swear to it. I did get the other guy that was sitting next
Yeah.
to me, so.
Was there a signing passed around? Public hearing?
No.
I don't recall.
At the joint regulatory
No, I
meeting
don't
is where
think
she was.
Yeah.
I think.
Maybe, Mary, we I think outside the box here, because it is a big commitment of time. It is tough for young people to show up at meetings on a regular basis. Maybe we have some other type of a meeting where we include people more, like we just sort of have scheduled. You know,
Hmm.
this month we're going to have,
Mhm.
you know, 2 or 3 young families, where you just come and we're gonna talk to you about what we're working on, and we wanna hear your inputs.
Mhm.
And then one of the meetings for the following month, we could do the same thing with the realtor, tell us, you know, what's going on, what do you know, just let us have them come into the meeting, explain to them what we're doing, let them give us feedback.
Mhm.
But we'd still benefit from, you know, like if we focused on, this is gonna be a market focused meeting, you know, how often does, what's going on in the real estate market, and then they could try to do the same thing for an engineer or something, I don't know, it might be.
Well, again, I think that's what Paul and Mary did, a lot of those discussions this year outside of the meeting.
Right.
To run things by people and get input and advice. I think we just need to keep up the commitment to doing that.
Well, I
Maybe
guess I
expand the
guess the
target.
difference was I was trying to get that to be on the record.
Yeah.
To formalize.
No,
that
no,
process.
no, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, we scrambled last summer. I mean, people were,
Oh,
what I heard from this
No,
group
no,
at the end was.
no criticism.
Don't,
I'm-
don't, details, whatever. I was
No,
like, okay,
no.
well, it was implied, like we were,
I mean-
people were kind of exhausted last
Yeah,
year.
we could have like a open forum thing, once we get the list of here's what we're gonna look at for this year, and then do like. An invite, like,
Yeah. send it.
come talk to us about what your feelings are one way or the other, or whatever, or
Yeah.
suggestions,
Right, right.
I mean, we
Yeah.
could do those. I mean, we could do one, you know, just right away,
Right.
once we got a list.
In September.
Right.
Then
And
we
then
could do 1 or 2 at
and
different
instead of just
times.
sending out a message at that
Right.
point, which we will, they're all public meetings, but we can each commit ourselves to say, I'm gonna get a young family to, you know,
Yeah.
a parent from a young family to show up next month, and, you know, we have
Yeah.
3 of them, that's all we need. It's better than what we normally have.
Yeah, I think we could work that into the front end of the schedule, and,
Mhm.
and I can certainly do like a office hours thing where I'm there, just at least people wanna drop in and get feedback that way.
Because we had such a good turnout at the community meeting. So we know there was 68 people at the first session, so we know there's interest.
Right.
And not all of them were as old as some of us in this room.
Right.
So we know there's interest, we just have to figure out
Mhm.
how to make
How to
it.
make their commitment smaller bites,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like their apps.
Yeah, yeah. The other, I think what you guys did, second what Carolyn was saying, I think like the off the record, just getting feedback from people who are affected by these, like the trade park people. It's really, I don't know how you could work without doing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important.
I wouldn't say it's off the record. I would say that it is fact finding, not in the meeting. We're a public body. We can't have off the
Oh,
record
so
stuff.
whatever.
Yeah, I would just be careful about that term, but fact finding, yes, because it's not in part of our public meeting. I think it's great.
Okay, well, why don't I, if anyone has a brilliant idea, you run across someone who thinks would be perfect for this committee, please raise your hand and we can follow up with them. I'll start kicking the tires with Paul around who might be serving on some other committees or have been actively involved in certain things and see if we can come up with. I just think, you know, because we're getting small, it'd be great to get one, or at least 2.
And if we do identify them, it would be, if we do identify somebody like that in the next couple of months, to be able to have a chance for you and Paul or whoever, whatever, to meet with them, if they get appointed,
Yeah.
to meet with them before our first meeting, so they have some orientation and.
But I would bring back, if we meet in August, I would bring back any name, I wouldn't.
Right.
I've typically brought bios here.
Yeah.
We've talked about people and then we can collectively make a recommendation to the task force, so I think I'd still wanna do, I wouldn't wanna be going from me
Right.
to the task force.
So maybe at the same time.
At
that-
the August meeting,
If
we
we-
might have 1 or 2 names.
Right, and if we do, then the timing would be good for us to recommend to the select board, along with the discussion about the work plan. Here are some potential members
Yeah.
to add to the committee. I think it's a good plan, Mary.
Okay. All right. ECSD updates,
We did that, the planning board.
pretty much all updated, okay.
and the select
Other
board.
items not reasonably anticipated, any other items? No?
Nope.
All right, if I don't hear any other new business, do you wanna have a motion to adjourn? Wanna make that?
So
Motion to adjourn. Pat, second?
Amen.
Martin, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Um,